Good morning, everyone. So I just wanted to thank everyone for watching yesterday's video. I was quite surprised at well over 800 people, 800 views, I should say, and deeply moved by the interest. That I don't normally get that kind of feedback from my writings. So today I want to talk about the difference between peacekeeping and peacemaking. I've had invitations to join peacekeeping groups, but they focus on, building militias and trying to maintain the state and the status quo to, root out the corruption and that sort of thing. But that's not the type of peace that I'm working on. There's two different versions, or two different definitions of the word peace. And the first is to maintain order, which is something that the state works to do. That's the type of peace that they work on. And the second is tranquility. And that's the type of peace I'm working on. So I'm not looking to maintain order because order requires a coercive power, a military to do that, where tranquility is something that I can find within myself and hopefully then express that in my relationships with other people. So there's a very different intent. And so I wanted to kind of dig a little deeper in what that means, because a few days ago I created and shared a flyer where I'm offering my peacemaking skills to help people navigate life, to bring tranquility into their life. And some people are interpreting that as peacekeeping, and so I just wanted to clarify that. So what I'm looking to do is to help people stand in their power, to have a voice when it comes to dealing with people that are making claims against them. And I don't want to do this in the fiction. A lot of people still function in the fiction, and a lot of the claims that people make against one another is done in the fiction. And what I mean by fiction is like the state, corporations, fictional constructs, figments of our own imagination. Sometimes really hard to differentiate that because we take these fictional constructs and then project it into reality, into the physical. Instead, I want to stand in spiritual jurisdiction and express myself spiritually in that jurisdiction and help people to do the same when it comes to dealing with people that are making claims against them. So I'm going to share some examples of how I've done this in the past. When it comes to child protective services, I've helped a few people by writing a letter that puts the burden on the social workers to prove their claims. And one of the things that I do is I work on a conditional acceptance, but it's important that I stand in spiritual jurisdiction when doing that and ask them to prove that I am actually in their jurisdiction, or the people that I'm helping is in their jurisdiction, because the fiction uses words against people. And the burden isn't on the people to defend themselves against it. The burden is actually on those individuals claiming that there's a duty or an obligation. And so I've helped a young man. He was about 12 at the time. This is years and years ago now, but helped him have a voice. And it really upset people in the office, to the point where they started listening to him, and they started reducing the medication that they were putting the kids on, and it changed the outlook of the people in the office, to the point where the social worker I was dealing with directly called me into her office and literally cried for an hour, expressing gratitude and appreciation for what I did, for reminding her why she got into social work to begin with, and apologized profusely. And I also helped a woman in Ontario protect her daughter from social workers, where, you know, the social workers and the police were like showing up at her door and making all kinds of claims. And so we wrote a letter and we asked that they prove certain things, again agreeing with them, but, you know, on the condition that they can prove what they're talking about, being careful to be able to articulate the words we were using. And despite this woman's mistakes that she made, because mistakes can always get cleaned up, they essentially left her alone at that point. And she then used the same letter to help a friend, and she took that letter into court and won her case against social services with the same approach. So to me, there's a lot of power and authority when we stand in spiritual jurisdiction. It's just a matter of knowing how to do that. And I also, I've, built airships and that kind of stuff, and had the municipality building inspectors and orders to stop construction. And, I dealt with that the same way. But a few years ago, I had a neighbor and the building inspector and the bylaw enforcement officer were actually quite forceful and making all kinds of threats. And unfortunately for them, they ran into me first before they ran into anybody else, which got me involved. And so I wrote my letter and asked them to approve their claims, and they essentially disappeared for a year. And then a year later, they walked up with the health inspector and 2 Ontario police officers. And I just happened to be in the yard when they showed up. And they were polite, respectful, extremely cautious with their words. They were confused. They didn't understand what I was doing. They were like talking with other jurisdictions to see, if somebody had done this before. It seemed like this is a precedent-setting case for them, and they wanted to learn more, and they even researched me and that kind of stuff. And I confronted the 2 police officers because they're there on sacred ground, armed, and they literally backed up and saying, we're not a part of this. We're just here to keep the peace, and we don't want anything to do with it. And I talked to them for like 2 hours, and they left. And we held ceremony before they left, where we smudged and we prayed, and they were respectful. They took off their hats. They participated in the prayer. And, this is what the state should be doing, how they should be interacting with people, rather than using force and coercion. They should be like asking questions and being of service. And this is in regards to the neighbor building without permits. And so I have examples like this, and even the process I went through to emancipate land. I emancipated 78 acres in Ontario. The land's name is Silent Dancer, and we held ceremony, but I also wrote letters to the King and the Lieutenant Governor, again, a conditional acceptance. And as a result of that process, I received a letter from the Lieutenant Governor acknowledging my letter and sending me her best wishes. So when we approach dealing with the state or dealing with these fictional constructs being animated by people who are lost, there's great power in this to be able to hold them accountable for what they're doing peacefully. I don't need force. I don't need to go to court. I don't need to sue people. I don't need to go to war against them. All I need to do is stand in spiritual jurisdiction and confront them. That's essentially what I'm doing, is calling them out. And because of my decades of research, I know what questions to ask. And so, if people need help, I'm willing to do that. But I also need help too, because I'm back in the grid to a certain degree, and the traveling and restoring the tools and all that kind of stuff that I need to be able to build tribe and emancipate more land is still a requirement. But this is the journey I'm on, and if this is resonating with people, you can check out my flyer. It's one of the featured photos on my profile. It kind of explains more of what I'm offering. And let's see if we can find a way to make peace with ourselves, make peace with other people, and help them to see the errors of their ways in claiming authority over other people, and instead standing in our own power and our own spiritual jurisdiction and navigating life that way. So I'm not interested in war. I'm not interested in militias or militaries or any of that kind of stuff. I'm interested in a true, deep, profound spiritual peace within myself, and hold space for others to do that too. And so I'm going to mention my Sacred Heart Circle again, because for me, this is about doing the shadow work and healing our traumas and integrating our shadows, so that we don't get triggered by people who are lost, people who are being manipulated by evil and completely disconnected from their true nature.